Culture Pop Remix.
Hello and welcome to Culture Pop Remix number 21. I'm your host, Oren Merton, and in this episode we're going to talk first about the comic book shows that have ended for this season and one bonus show that just began. And then I'm going to talk about the future of the podcast. So ready, set, here we go. This really is a golden age for television, and genre television, comic-based television is no exception to that. There have been some really, really great shows, and some that haven't been so great. Now, this isn't a comprehensive list of every single science fiction or fantasy production based on a comic series out there. I can only watch what I can watch. So there's some stuff that is supposed to be really good, like Runaways, The Gift, Preacher, that I haven't watched. I watched the first episode of Krypton, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was setting up an interesting sort of entire society on Krypton and how the family of El plays into it, but I didn't get a chance to watch more. There's other shows that I've stopped watching, like iZombie, and it's not because iZombie was bad. There's just so many things I had to do and that are out there to watch. So these are the ones that just ended I want to talk about. So I've already talked about Jessica Jones and all that, and as I'm recording this, Luke Cage season 2 just went live. I'm really excited about that, but I haven't started it yet. So this is just the stuff that ended in June with May or June, I guess, with one bonus, and that is the brand new Cloak and Dagger. All right, so let's get to it. I'm going to start with Lucifer. I'm kind of loosely going in order of how these things air on television in the United States. If you're watching them on Netflix or on a streaming channel, then it doesn't really matter. But that's sort of how I'm organizing it, just for the sake of organization. So we're starting with Lucifer, which I just really love that show. It is fun. It does not take itself too seriously, yet at the same time, the characterizations are great and the characters are well drawn. The acting is excellent. Sometimes the effects are a little cheesy. You can tell the budget isn't super high, but it is just a fun and enjoyable and engaging program, regardless of genre. It's candy. It's popcorn. It's candy. You can't not like it, in my opinion. And this season was absolutely no exception. This third season had a wonderful arc. It used the biblical Cain as one of the characters, and that is in the comic as well. That's also in the Neil Gaiman original comic. So it is still based on the comic, though it is its own thing, and it took it its own direction. Great for television, and it was just fun. Plus, you had, on the very last episode that was aired, you had Neil Gaiman doing the voice of God. So come on, how can you not love that kind of meta commentary, that in fact he is the one who basically created the comic series upon which the show is based, and they got him to play the character of God. How awesome. And he's got a great voice, and he's a great voice actor. So it was just a wonderful way to cap what was a fun and engaging season. Tom Ellis, who plays Lucifer, is dead bang perfect. Laura German, who plays Lieutenant Deckard, and all the other actors do really fantastic jobs. This is a cast that you can really fall in love with, and the stories are fun. They're not going to be your deep stories, but it's really worth watching. And for those of you who didn't follow, Fox canceled this show. And it was very sad because, yes, its ratings weren't great in the United States for Fox, but apparently they have been really good overseas. But because Fox itself wasn't making that money, Fox canceled it. So what happened was, after a couple weeks of negotiation, Netflix picked it up. And I am really, really I'm glad. It's just a show I enjoy watching. I'm happy there's going to be more of them. But I think Netflix is a much better fit for a show like Lucifer. So I'm really excited to see what Netflix and Warner Brothers can put together. And I would be surprised if it shows up anytime soon. I'm betting it'll end up being 2019 until we see the season of Lucifer sort of land. But I think it's going to be worth it. I'm really excited about it. And so that's Lucifer. Definitely recommended. Next up, I want to talk about Supergirl. Now we're getting into the CW Arrowverse DC shows. So I believe that Supergirl is the first that airs, and I really enjoyed it. I think Supergirl always had potential, but I think it's really found its footing on the CW. Melissa Benoist, who plays Kara Danvers / Supergirl, is just so perfect in the part. She really embodies that kind of heroism while at the same time giving the character depth. And I really liked the arc. I think you need good villains for the hero to face, and they had them. You need a good team to surround her. They had it. The arc with Mon-El, her former love, I think was handled really well. And I have no complaints. They even threw in episodes in there that hit contemporary issues of pollution, refugees, gun rights. Again, all handled intelligently and not just sort of bashing you over the head with one particular philosophy or whatever. So really, this is a show I'm happy is continuing, and they handled it really well. It was a great arc, and recommended, absolutely. So the next one in the Arrowverse is DC's Legends of Tomorrow. That one began really shaky because it didn't quite know what it wanted to be. It was basically sort of taking the extra characters and the throwaways from the different Arrowverse shows and sticking them on one show, but it didn't know what it wanted to be. It said, okay, we're going to do time travel. It's going to be fun, maybe, and how do we do this? Here we are, and now it is really, really fun. It's really found its footing. They've gotten rid of some of the extraneous characters. They've had some emotional farewells. But at the same time, they have turned it into another just batshit crazy, awesome, fun show. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's like, hey, let's time travel and have weird experiences in this new time. I mean, a show doesn't take it seriously when, the finale is basically a sort of Furby toy being fought with a super giant, evil demon. I mean, come on, a demon against a fluffy toy? This is not a show that is expecting you to be sort of, wowed by its hyper drama. I mean, they're playing it for laughs and for fun. And there is nothing in the world that is wrong with that. And at the same time, the characters are drawn well enough, they are acted well enough that you still care about them and you care about their arcs. And they do manage to give, not everybody, but most of the characters a good arc. The main star of the show, Katie Lotz, I believe is how you pronounce her name. I hope I didn't get it wrong because she's great. She's the captain, White Canary. She just does a wonderful job. Brandon Routh is as Ray Palmer. Really, everyone is very good. And, Dominic Purcell is Heatwave, sort of the villain who reluctantly becomes a hero. It's all handled well and it's fun. I'm really excited about next season because I have always loved Matt Ryan playing Constantine. And he is a regular for next season. How cool is that? They're going mystical next season and they're bringing Constantine. That is so cool. So I'm very excited about next season. They set up a great next season that has a lot of potential. Characters I love. I mean, this is just fun. How can you not love fun? All right, so after this, we're getting more into the sort of serious quote-unquote Arrowverse with Flash. Now, it's still fun. Flash is still about humor. It's still about sort of the powers and craziness. But now we're getting a little bit more grounded than Supergirl, which is all about aliens, and DC Legends of Tomorrow, which is all about being insane. Flash is, it's about the meta powers, but it's more grounded. I think this was a good season. The season before I had some issues with, because one of my real pet peeves is when smart characters do stupid things just to move the plot. There was not nearly as much of this time. They managed to figure out how to have the good guys do the right things and just have it go wrong. And to me, that's always more fun, because at that point, you're not like, okay, the only reason this whole thing happened is because our heroes were idiots. Now it's like, wow, the villain is really smarter than the heroes. Literally, the villain this season was called the Thinker. And it was well put together, and I appreciated that. And it gave everyone some arcs, and I think, and of course, Tom Cavanaugh plays Harry Wells, got to really play a bunch of Harry Wells, and it was really engaging. And they even managed to make it emotional as well. And they set up a next season that isn't quite clear where it's going, but has potential. So I think that's pretty good. So now we need to get to sort of the root of the Arrowverse, which is the show Arrow. Now, I was not crazy about this season of Arrow. I know to some Arrow fans that's going to be sacrilege, because Arrow is the center of the Arrowverse. They think somehow it's, more untouchable or whatever. But, I have to say, I wasn't really crazy about this. First of all, it's tough to break up a team. It really is. I think DC's Legends of Tomorrow managed to break up a team in such a way that it felt organic and that it didn't dilute the show. But Arrow, in my opinion, it broke up the team in a way that diluted the show. And I think the finale was actually one of the best episodes of the season. And we saw it kind of undoing some of the damage that, in my opinion, had been done. But still, I just wasn't crazy about the arc. I liked the way it sort of switched big bads in mid-season. I think that's not easy to do, and I think they pulled it off. But I just didn't care much about either big bad, honestly. And their motivations didn't seem sort of worthy of being the big bad. So this was not a season that particularly, won me over. And of course, it set up next season, and it set up kind of an interesting scenario for where Oliver Queen Arrow is, but it didn't. Again, I'm not sold. I mean, I love the characters enough that I'm going to keep watching. Like it with Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., I loved the original team enough to go for half of the following season before I gave it up. So I'm not giving up Arrow just yet. But of all the CW superhero shows that I've watched, of all the Arrowverse shows, this is the one that I am closest to giving up on, which is I'd be sad about, because I love Stephen Amell. He plays an amazing Arrow. I adore him, and I adore the cast. I just don't like really what they did with the cast this season. So, fingers are crossed for next season. We'll see. And the last comic-based series that I watched was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, for those of you who don't know my history with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I sort of mentioned it in passing already, but I was really excited about it first season, and it just didn't catch fire with me. But I liked it enough to keep going second season. So I didn't actually watch half of second season. I watched maybe a handful of shows, And it just, they'd broken up the team and I didn't like where it was going. And so I just gave up after a few episodes of season 2. Then last season, which I think was season 5 or something, they brought in Ghost Rider, which is one of my very favorite Marvel superheroes. So I watched season 5 and I did like it. So I figured, you know what? Okay, this season, I think season 6, they're going into space. So I'll watch it. I'll see how it goes. And, it was okay. It was okay enough that I watched when it was in space for the first half of the season. I was interested to see how they were going to get back. And then they got back. But once they got back, so much of it was about all this prophecy that this is going to happen. You're going to destroy the world and all this is going to happen. And I just didn't care about the prophecy. So the second half of the arc was how can they stop the prophecy? But I just didn't think that it was really set up. It seemed very arbitrary. And the way they were going about trying to stop it seemed not, again, it was smart characters sometimes doing really stupid things. And I was drawn in enough that I wanted to know how it ended, but I wasn't so drawn in that I had to watch it when it came out, and it was something I was excited about. It got to the point at the very end where I was like, all right, well, maybe this one will be better. So I can't, now Arrow, I know I am watching next season, and I hope it's good. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I don't think I'm going to watch next season. If I start reading, it's really good, then maybe I will. But it didn't leave me with enough that I really want to see where it goes. So those are the shows that just ended. Some of those shows I think would maybe have really benefited from shorter seasons. Maybe Arrow would have been great if instead of, 23, 24 shows, I don't remember how many it was, 20-something shows, if maybe it only had 13, they would have been 13 really compact, great shows. Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., I guess their ratings weren't that great either, and it was only brought back next season, I think, for 13 shows. So maybe it'll be a good, compact 13-show season. I don't know. With Lucifer on Netflix, they don't really do a whole lot of 20-some show seasons, or any. I'm not sure. So Lucifer may only be brought back for maybe 13 shows or so, but there'll be 13 hopefully exciting, fun, great, entertaining shows, and with better special effects budgets. So I am very much excited about that. All right, so before we stop talking about TV shows, let's talk about one that just began. It's a Marvel show called Cloak and Dagger. It's based on two teen heroes, wait for it, Cloak and Dagger. Young boy Tyrone is Cloak, young girl Tandy is Dagger. So this show is on, it airs, I stream it, but it airs on the Freeform network in the United States, which is an ABC-owned network. ABC owned by Disney. Disney owns Marvel, so of course. But the main thing is that it's a channel that used to be called ABC Family, and it's very teen. It's very much about teen shows. So I like the characters of Cloak and Dagger in the comics. I used to enjoy their interplay with Spider-Man and the Ultimate Universe. And so I was curious enough about Cloak and Dagger. Plus, the cool thing, guy has a cloak, can put it on, can, transport himself. Girl can magically make daggers. And, it's an interesting symbiosis, an interesting story. And so I was curious enough to watch it. I've watched all 4 episodes so far that have aired, and I'm not sure. I kind of expected this to be a bit more of a teen show than a show for, a middle-aged man. But even so, I'm just not sure. I mean, they give Cloak a really interesting backstory. We see his brother being killed. He's, from a black very well-to-do family, middle class, goes to a private school. You know, we see him trying. He's trying to live up to his brother. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to be a good person. But, you know, being black in the South is just not necessarily an easy thing. And you see his trials, you see his tribulations, you see how much he's trying. At one point, he talks about trying, and he says, I feel like I'm flailing. And you feel for him because you see him doing it. And so I'm very much interested in Cloak's story. Dagger, not so much. I mean, Tandy begins from tragedy. You see your father die, but flash forward to her as an older teen, and she's not, you know, yeah, okay, she's kind of a very troubled person because she's had this sad past. But the thing is that you don't feel sympathy for her at all. It's like, wow, she's really screwed up her life, and it's too bad that she began from tragedy. But there's nothing that you see about her that makes you sympathize with how she's acting. It's like when someone's horrible, and it's not that I'm a good person being horrible, but, oh, she's just horrible. It's hard to identify with her. Now, I think in episode 4 and stuff, they're trying to sort of show you more in her life, and that maybe that's not the case. But I'm not drawn into her story at all. Tyrone, yes. Tandy, no. And, you know, when you only like half of the main team, you know, how excited can you be? Now, they build up some mystery, and that's kind of interesting. And the adult characters in the teen story are kind of interesting. So, you know, there's interesting stuff around the two, and we'll see where it goes. I also have to say, for a teen show, it does get kind of bloodier and more intense than I would have anticipated. So, you know, I give them marks for that, for not making this just like, you know, my first comment to Golden when we were watching the first one was that it was kind of like what they used to air as the ABC after school special. That, you know, it was like, oh, teens in crisis, but it was always very diluted, very whitewashed, very sort of unreal. And that was the first one. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. But that isn't the case anymore. So if you are interested enough to watch the pilot, give it a few. And I'm not saying give it a few and you're going to love it, because I'm, you know, about episode 5, I think, airs the evening of this recording. And I haven't really loved episodes 1 through 4, but they've intrigued me enough that I'm willing to keep going. So that's where I am on that one. I'm willing to keep going, but I'm not sold. So if you're interested and you like the characters of Cloak and Dagger, that one can transport, one can make daggers, and the two of them are trying to discover what's going on in their past, and there's, you know, crime and police involvement, then maybe give it a watch. But we'll see where it goes. All right, so that is TV. Now I want to take a couple minutes and talk about the future of Culture Pop Remix. It's going away. That's right. The podcast is dead. Long live the podcast. So let me explain. When I started Culture Pop Remix, it was sort of a catch-all for pop culture. And if you go to back episodes, you'll know I talk about books, I talk about technology, I talk about television and movies and comics. I talk about all kinds of things involved with pop culture that interest me, the parts of pop culture that interest me. There were things I never covered, like reality television or celebrity Instagramming or whatever. I mean, and I never was going to. So as time's gone on, here we are, 21 episodes into Culture Pop Remix. And I've realized the podcast is at its best and most interesting when I host panel discussions, and we really can get some good discussion and conversation going about these things. So I've decided that I really want to focus on that I don't want to just be covering sort of pop culture writ large. And what that means is I'm not going to be doing book reviews or comic reviews or talking about technology or whatever. I'm really going to be focusing on visual entertainment in this field. And to do that, I thought now's the opportunity to not just change the content, but also change the way I present it. So there's going to be an episode 22, but it's not going to be an episode of Culture Pop Remix. It's instead going to be an episode of The Omega Beam, which is the name I'm giving this new, more focused version of the podcast. So for those of you who are into comics, you already know what the Omega Beam is a reference to. You know that DC Comics villain Darkseid shoots Omega beams from his eyes. But ultimately, I just liked the name. I just think the Omega Beam sounds cool, and it sounds very sci-fi, doesn't it? It sounds very much focused instead of Culture Pop Remix, which I also like that name a lot, but it is broader. And there was never a point I was going to cover all of pop culture. It was always going to be narrower than the full breadth of pop culture. I think the name, the Omega Beam, really helps define where I want this podcast to go. And I very much want you to come with me. It's going to be more of what you already like the most about this podcast. The website is going to be more streamlined. It's going to be easier to find show notes and things like that. If you want to look up information and links and things like that, I'm going to have more detailed show notes. So the back end of things should also be better and more user-friendly than it is currently. And overall, I think this is going to be a real positive. The only thing I can imagine is if just the transition gets a little bit borked or takes a little bit longer than I expect it to. But hopefully it won't. This is obviously not a spur of the moment thing. I've been doing a lot of research, so hopefully it will all pay off. And that is the end of Culture Pop Remix number 21 and the end of Culture Pop Remix. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any comments or questions about either this episode or the change that is forthcoming, please email me at info@culturepopremix.com. If you liked this episode, please leave a review in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are subscribing, the subscription should still be kept when I change over to the Omega Beam. If it doesn't, then please check back for the Omega Beam and subscribe to that one. All right, so that's it for this. Please be good to yourselves and each other, and I will catch you next time.
Culture Pop Remix.